The Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem is world-renowned as a bastion of biodiversity conservation and an arena for exploring relationships among human demographics, social and economic development, and natural resources conservation. With this as its impetus, the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation partnered with the Draper Natural History Museum at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West and the University of Wyoming to create the Camp Monaco Prize, a $100,000 grant for integrated scientific research and public education initiatives in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. The name of the award commemorates the backcountry camp near Yellowstone, visited by Prince Albert I of Monaco and William F. Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill. The inaugural Camp Monaco Prize was conferred in 2013, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the historic meeting of His Serene Highness the Prince and Buffalo Bill.
September 1913, Prince Albert of Monaco arrived in Cody, Wyoming. He was to be the guest of A.A. Anderson, who ran the Pallet Ranch outside of Meeteetse, Wyoming. However, upon arriving in Cody, they met Buffalo Bill, and Buffalo Bill wanted to make sure that the prince was thoroughly entertained and welcomed to this area. The prince was able to witness a parade for the Park County Fair, which was occurring at the same time. And then Buffalo Bill also arranged to put on an impromptu Wild West show for the prince. He brought in the Crow people from the Crow Reservation under the leadership of Chief Plentycoo. Anderson and the prince traveled up the North Fork Valley to Pahaska Teepee, where Buffalo Bill held a reception at Pahaska for the prince, brought in a number of hunting parties that were in the area to meet him. And then the prince went further up the North Fork River, where he was able to shoot a bull elk and a large bear under the guidance of Fred Richard. The prince took these specimens back to Monaco with him, where a natural history display was put together. And it must be kept in mind that not only was this a hunting trip for Prince Albert, but this was an opportunity to really explore the Yellowstone ecosystem, especially the wildlife. Not only as a hunter, but as a naturalist, he would have taken great interest in the conservation efforts that were occurring here in this area, preserving the big game populations, in addition to learning more about North American wildlife to provide that interpretation for his displays in Monaco. The Buffalo Bill Center of the West was quite fortunate that our relationship with Monaco continues to this day. Due to Prince Albert II's generosity and his renewed interest in this area, the Camp Monaco Prize was established to further our understanding of this unique region.
Burning forests, melting ice, migrating elk. At first glance, the three research projects awarded the Camp Monaco Prize seem totally unrelated. But at the heart of each are diverse teams of deeply committed researchers working to explore the interplay of biodiversity at multiple scales of time and space. While each project has a specific focus, all clearly work to explore the diverse set of interconnects that form the mosaic that is the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem. Dr. Monica Turner, 2019 Camp Monaco Prize, anticipating and envisioning future landscapes of the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem.
I don't expect to see them under the plants.
By the shrubs?
By the shrubs, yeah.
Fire ecology is studying the causes and the dynamics, meaning like how it works and how it changes, and the consequences of fire in our landscapes. And I think it matters to a lay audience. These days, I think it's not hard to explain why it matters. I live in Wisconsin. We've just had a week's worth of smoke and hazardous air because of all of the wildfires burning in the forests in Canada. And in recent years, we've had the forest fires throughout California, and Oregon and Washington State. So I think people are realizing that fire has important consequences, not only for the forest, but also for the places where we live. In terms of a forest, which is what I study here in Yellowstone, fire is a really important natural process that can renew the forest. It kills trees, but it also renews the forests. It gives us a mosaic of ages and of different forest species across the landscape. So it's one of the really important drivers of the forest that we see. And right now, it's of a lot of importance because with the warming of the climate, since climate is an important component driving fires, we're seeing changes in the way that fire acts in our landscapes. And so that's another important thing because it may change quite a lot of what we see as well as the places where we live. I applied for the Camp Monaco grant because it just seemed like such a natural extension of the kinds of work that we were doing in Yellowstone. And it just seemed like it made sense with the call that came out. And in terms of the difference that it made, it's quite substantial because it both helped us to complete the computer simulation modeling that we were doing to integrate the forest-dependent wildlife species, for example, and explore the consequences that the climate change and the changing fire regime would have not only for the plants, the trees, but also for some of the wildlife. But I think more importantly, the emphasis on communication and education and outreach to the public is what we would not have otherwise been able to do. So we are currently working on coming up with ways to visually show what would the landscapes of Yellowstone look like in the future, because graphs and maps and all of that kind of stuff don't really grab you, or if you're not used to thinking that way, it's pretty hard to do. And so what we've been able to do is take photographs of scenic vistas in Yellowstone as they are now, and then manipulate those photographs to show what we think the future landscape would look like at the end of the century based on our best science and our best projections. We would never have been able to do that if it wasn't for the Monaco Prize. Everyone knows Yellowstone. And so being able to take advantage of a place that so many people know and so many people love, and then be able to show what the change in climate will do to the vistas that we see. And it's not saying whether it's good or bad, but just this is what it would be like. And sharing that with people, I think will be able to help people understand what the future could look like and how places that we see now might look very different to our children or our grandchildren. And I think Yellowstone is just a very special and a unique place that so many people know that it makes it ideal for trying to communicate those consequences.
Dr. Craig Lee, 2016 Camp Monaco Prize. Biodiversity of the Longue Durée. Melting ice and the synergy of humans, bison, bighorn sheep, and white bark pine in the Greater Yellowstone.
The lion's share of archaeology is made up of things that are very well preserved. And by that I mean little bits of chipped stone, things that are inorganic, that survive weathering processes very well. Because of way leading on to way, I wound up getting interested in and involved in working with organic materials that were being exposed by atypical melting in frozen environments in the alpine. This material that we're identifying was not cached, it's not put away for some other use, it was used in this actual location where we're recovering it. So it's just a very cohesive picture that it provides, and it's a very unusual look at the past. The organic tools are much less well preserved, and consequently we don't have this opportunity to see them and engage with them very often. The reason that it's so important to access these organic materials is that simply they are by far and away the most dominant form of material culture that a living, breathing human being would actually be using and actually engaging with. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the world about climate change, be it anthropogenic or otherwise. It's very hard to, let's say, put a positive spin on ocean acidification, right? You can't gin that up into something that's positive. But with the atypical melting that's been happening at ice patches and the release of this organic material, whether it's anthropogenic climate change or not, it's a silver lining to that climate change. We're in this place and position because we know enough to go and look and identify these places. We're able to engage then with this organic material. Unfortunately, if that organic material melts out and folks aren't there to engage with it in a thoughtful manner, the previously arrested natural processes of decay would just take over. And so the material rapidly goes through phase shifts and is no longer recognizable as a complete cohesive tool that you could really study. We as archaeologists had been kind of dancing around this world of climate science and trying to learn more about sort of the co-located ecology by virtue of these other willing experts in Dave McWethy and Greg Peterson. We saw this as an opportunity to try a collaborative project that had, I think, a fairly high potential for return, because we'd already demonstrated that ice patch archaeology exists, but we hadn't ever kind of gotten down and sat down together and said, what is it that we really need? What are the things that we would like to ask about these locations? What types of questions could we pursue, particularly if we were approaching it from multiple different fronts? And so the Camp Monaco Prize basically was the first time that we really built a multidisciplinary team that brought together these different talent sets. The colleagues that have come together to work in the Alpine, the thing that cannot be understated here is that, I mean, this is hardly just about the archaeology, just like it's hardly just about the dendrochronology, let's say, that's associated with some of the ancient tree stands, or hardly about the climatic shifts as revealed through pollen rain or fire records as revealed through charcoal, or hardly about the past ingesta or the scat that the animals leave. The thing that's remarkable is that we've got people with very unique skill sets that are coming together collaboratively and cohesively to keep engaging with this absolutely precious opportunity that this generation has. That is sort of mission critical thing that we should be concerned about as a people writ large, as civilization, because if we don't engage with it, we're basically making decisions for people down the line, future generations, because the material is melting out, it's being exposed, those arrested processes are re-engaging, and maximize the story that we can get out of these honestly endangered environments.
Dr. Arthur Middleton and Joe Reese, Camp Monaco Prize 2013. Rediscovering the elk migrations of the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, a project of transboundary science and outreach.
Well, what drew me to studying migrations, I think, was several things. One, as an ecologist, beginning to understand the importance of migrations to ecosystems. When animals can move freely, their populations can grow more abundant, and they can feed lots of other critters and things that we care about on landscapes. I think the other thing is just what draws almost everybody to migrations, which is they're kind of amazing and inspiring, and there's something about them that I think resonates with people around the journey of life. I had this itch and this urge coming out of the study of one elk population near Cody, Wyoming, the Clark's Fork elk herd, knowing that migration that they made annually was a bigger story. When I saw the Camp Monaco Prize, I saw it as a way to gain the support to embark on that, that bigger story. So one of the amazing things about the Camp Monaco Prize was the ability to pair up the science with the storytelling. And I'm not a storyteller, by training, and so that meant collaborating with Joe Reese, who was able to bring out images of these migrations so that both the science, went further in terms of reaching people, and also vice versa, so that the photographs weren't just your average wildlife photograph, but they sort of had the weight of our new learning, behind them. And one way to think about the migrations in the system is like they are as important a national treasure as Old Faithful. And yet you can't drive up and park your car and walk 2 minutes over to see them, and you can't get a schedule of when they're going to happen. so that you can predict it and plan your day around it. That's where Joe's work was absolutely critical, is he was sort of the person who, on behalf of the public and everybody who wanted to learn about these, could go set up his camera traps, get in there, spend the time, and bring back the pictures and the video that could really help people understand what it was that we were talking about here. And without that, the science would probably fall on a lot of deaf ears. Yellowstone is a migratory system, like the Serengeti, like the steppe of Central Asia, like the tundra of the Arctic. And the first step is to know that and to understand it and to see what it is that we need to see and to think about conserving. And so that's a big part of what we were trying to accomplish from the beginning with the Camp Monaco Prize. But the next thing is, what are we going to do about it? And a lot of the most urgent work is going to be on the private lands. Sometimes we call them the working lands in this ecosystem. So a lot of these migrations depend in some way on private lands. Elk in the winter, whether summer range and their migration corridors are often protected on national parks and national forests and wilderness areas. In the winter and on the lower parts of the migration corridors, they might spend 40, 60, 80% of that time in winter on private lands. And so the question becomes, for those animals, those elk, it's mule deer as well, pronghorn antelope and others that are spending time on those private lands. And what they need is landowners, many of whom have already been part of keeping them there, to be thinking about the long-term integrity of that land. There are tools that can help accomplish that. Conservation easements are one. This is where a landowner is, when they're willing, donates or sells the rights to develop that land in the future, or a large portion of that land in the future, to a land trust. And so we know that habitat will continue to be intact. One of the other things is fences, other barriers. So it's going to take the removal of fences that aren't needed anymore. There's a lot of fencing on the landscape that people didn't know was in a place that was problematic for wildlife until recently. There are other places where there's going to be a continued need to have a fence, but it could maybe be a little easier to cross or to pass through. I want people to learn that places like Yellowstone or a national forest or a ranch next to them, these aren't zoos. Animals move. They need big open spaces, and when we give them that space, that is how we get abundance and productivity of life.
For 10 years, the Camp Monaco Prize has facilitated research in important topics related to the Greater Yellowstone, such as elk migration, fire ecology, and the human use of the landscape. These topics have furthered our understanding of how the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem regulates itself, how humans have changed this region, and it also demonstrates how unique and valuable this region is to the nation. The recipients of the Camp Monaco Prize are forging new ways to synthesize research, public education, and land management to promote a deeper understanding of biodiversity and foster concrete actions to mitigate the impacts of accelerating global change.
My great-great-grandfather, Prince Albert I of Monaco, was a man of great accomplishments in the domain of scientific research and navigation. His commitment to conservation of our natural resources, both marine and terrestrial, fueled his exploration of the oceans and what was then the nascent field of oceanography. This stewardship was shared by William Cody, most known as Buffalo Bill, a man of intellectual curiosity and showmanship whose respect and knowledge of the American West established what we now know to be the cowboy culture and folklore of this majestic part of the United States. To honor these two visionaries and to commemorate their meeting in 1913, the Camp Monaco Prize was established to recognize and support scientific research in the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem. The work of Dr. Arthur Middleton, Dr. Craig Lee, and Dr. Monica Turner merit our acclaim and gratitude for perpetuating the actions and spirit of environmental consciousness shown by my great-great-grandfather and Buffalo Bill. In closing, I am pleased to announce that the fourth Camp Monaco Prize will be conferred in late 2024 in partnership with the Draper Museum of Natural History and the Buffalo Bills Center of the West.